Bible truth number 6. Let me give you the first 5 as kind of a reminder. Bible truth of C.A.L.M, Care After Loss Ministry. Number 1, there is hope. Bible truth number 1. I was talking to Nikki about this as well. We'll probably roll this every couple of years in the church on a Sunday night just to catch people who missed. Because I tell you, if you haven't gone through some great grief, you will. And you need to know how to handle that grief so you're not caught unawares. And so at least you'll have gone through the class, and when it comes, you can go, hold on, wait, I've got that packet. We've got that YouTube. I can go through that. And you'll have the tools you need. Because frankly, most of us are caught completely unawares. And God didn't give us His Word for us to be caught unawares. So I want you to have it. And probably rotate 13 weeks out of a year is a lot to dedicate to one thing every year. And so we'll probably roll that every couple of years. We'll roll this class. Do I have it on, Chris? I'm good. We'll probably roll this every couple of years. We are recording it. Our first session was kind of icky. And so that'd be good. The next time we roll through, we'll record it again. And who did I start with last time? I started Miss LaDonna, so it's Nikki this time. And let me give you all 5 before, but just to give her a heads up that she's going. There is hope. Bible truth number 1, there's hope. When you are in a grief and your eyes have darkened and dimmed and you're closed in and all you can see is the hurt and self, you got to be reminded there's hope. This situation is written. It's done. But that doesn't mean hope is gone. And there is hope. Number 2, death is separation from God ultimately. So for the loved ones who know Christ, they do not die because there is no separation from God. But death is separation from God. We talked about salvation and we talked about the idea of turning to Him. Bible truth number 3, and we talked a lot about preparing people for this. Everyone dies. That's the one thing we all share. We will all die physically. And I think it's important, and I'm not agreed with all the time, and that's fine. People can be wrong. That's fine. I don't mind being right. It's okay. I think we should expose our children to the idea that death occurs. I don't think we should hide them from funerals and hide them from sick people conversations. I don't think we should also throw them in the casket with a loved one or take them necessarily when hard conversations are being had at a hospital. I think you should observe the capability of your child, but also expose them to the fact that we're going to die. I grew up on a farm. We saw lots of things die. We put down things. We knew death was very real growing up. But sometimes you forget that when something bad happens and you think, why did that happen? Well, everybody dies. And it's not an easy thing, but it's a true thing. That's why they're Bible truths. Bible truth number 4. This is important. How I respond to death is my choice. How I respond to death is my choice. And that's important because you may think the event caused you to be the way you are right now, but that's not true. You are responding, and we talked about that in church this morning too, that you're responding the way you chose. And then Bible truth number 5, this is one I needed. Well, not everybody needs, but probably most of our church needs, because we've got one of those A-type fix-it personality churches. Bible truth number 5, I have permission to mourn. And I'm working on a bookmark for this. Brother Carter has one, but I'm working on a more modern-looking one. And so once I get that aligned and right, I'll get bookmarks for us for this as well. But I've started to think that I need to start giving out little cards and bookmarks to help remind truths when I can remember to. So I have permission to mourn. You are not the Savior of your family. You are not the strength of your family. You can mourn. You can. It will not hurt your family for you to mourn. It might give them permission if you mourn. I struggle with that. I want my family to know I've got this. It's okay. And for that reason, I probably struggled in delaying getting down the road in grief, right? Because you don't fall apart around those you love. You fall apart alone. And so, number 6. Number 5, we gave you permission. Number 6. this is probably the most impactful of all the lessons. Now, do you have the book? They don't have the book. I'll give you a book, too. Chris, if you'll do that for me, I appreciate my MC. And that's yours. I'll ask you to share if you can. I figure after, 65 years of marriage, y'all are 52. Like I'm exaggerating a lot. I figure after 52 years of marriage, y'all can share. And you'll probably have to read it to him anyway. So, I don't know, his eyes may be going. I don't mean he can't read. Yeah. So, but that book this lessons are written out of that book, and it's very, it goes into a whole lot more detail about Abraham, and we're going to go into that as well, but about Abraham versus Jacob and Isaac and their mourning and the different ways that they mourn. And so, number 6, I have the responsibility to stop mourning. I have the responsibility to stop mourning. Nikki, if you read the first paragraph.
We can all breathe in great relief at the fact that God allows us to freely mourn our losses, and that He has established a time for mourning, and that He is the rescuer of the mourner and exalting them to safety and rest. However, the time for mourning is not meant to be perpetual, nor is it meant to be a long period of time.
And while we're passing the mic, let me make a statement or so on that. Ecclesiastes said there's a time for everything, right? A time for lifting up, a time for casting down, rejoicing, mourning. There's a time for that. And when it says here that it's not meant to be perpetual, nor is it meant to be a long period of time, I do want you to remember that not everybody grieves the same amount of time. Some people take longer. What we're talking about is that some people grieve perpetually. Because remember, this grief could be more than a death. It could be a divorce. It could be a retirement. Can cause grief because if your identity is I know for me, it's like empty nest. No, your kids were born to leave. So don't have grief when your kids leave. You've been ready for this for 18 years. Come on now. But anyway, that's what. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make, and that's not a dig at Shelby. We're fine with Shelby. That's not a dig. Sometimes it is empty nesting with Shelby. She does her own thing. She lives her own life. But the point I'm trying to make is that some people will take something, and it's been 30 years, and you'll ask them, how you doing today? Not meaning anything. You don't know. It's 30 years. You don't even know. You didn't know in 30 years. And you say, hey, how's the day been? Well, Or you meet them for the first time. And as they introduce themselves as the father of a perpetually 22-year-old child or whatever, right? They live in it for the rest of their lives. Or they live in that divorce, or they live in that trauma for the rest of their lives. So that's what we're trying to say, is yes, you are given permission to mourn, but you also need to know that God wants you to stop mourning. He wants you to start rejoicing in Him again, start living again. Mourning is death. It's identifying in the death of what was lost. So we do want to mourn. You need to mourn. It's part of healing. But at some point you have to remind yourself, I have to give this to God. I've got to let God take care of this. And I'm speaking to you from a position of being able to say this. And in the last few weeks, I think I've finally come to that place where it still hurts, but I can walk free. And so, Shelby, paragraph 2.
So many times people fall into the clutches of unbiblical, life-debilitating grief because they have failed to recognize this Bible truth. You have the responsibility to stop mourning. When people are allowed to continue for too long a time in a state of self-focus and weeping and grieving, they can get stuck in the pit of mourning and won't see how they can ever get out. Such an extended period of mourning induces the griever to extreme self-centeredness in their grief and drags them through anger, bitterness, resentment, cynicism, and depression.
What do you think about that? Does that make sense? I know those days where I was severely incapacitated I know that it was mostly self-focused and internalized. And I'm not trying to, I really am not stepping on and trying to be like, hey, get over it. I'm not. Because that is not my job to tell you when it's time. It is my job to tell you that it will be time. There will be a time that you have to turn that over to the Lord and move forward in your life. And so I often will say, and Jesse, you're next, but I'll often say, my wife and I will be talking, Shelby often in the middle of that, and we say to each other, he's up there cavorting on the streets of gold, spending time with Jesus, probably, sitting there saying silly things with Nana, and he could care less about our grieving here. I don't mean that callously, but why would you worry about the affairs of men and the eternal? And so I got to remind myself that I'm not hurting. I'm not honoring him. I am grieving, and I need to heal, but it does have to stop. It does. And I have had a number of men reach into my life and say, it does have to stop. Not telling me when. Brother Carter has been very kind to me and called me and helped me and given me counsel in it. But he did say, it does have to stop. You got to move forward. Jess, if you read the last two paragraphs.
Oftentimes people are enabled to continue mourning for too long by well-meaning friends, family, and even pastors who in an innocent willingness to help keep the functionality of the griever to a minimum, allowing them to perpetuate their grief through idleness. So how does the mourner stop mourning? Let us consider yet again the example of Abraham.
So remember, Abraham is our example of proper grief. And Isaac is our example, and Jacob to some degree. Isaac is our example of improper grief. So Miss Magna, if you're there. Let me ask you this. Anybody have questions about those paragraphs? I said a lot in addition to them. Anybody have questions? I told you I'd get better. I probably won't remember next time, but all right, cool. Miss Magnan, Genesis 23, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, you might as well.
All right. And Sarah died in Karjaharba. I hope that's right.
It's okay.
The same as in Hebrew in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah, and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead, and spake unto the sons of Heath, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a portion of a burial place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight.
Okay. So think about that. Let me ask you a question, and then I want to say something about that. Abraham went to weep and mourn for Sarah, and then, but then he stood up from before his dead. So he went to weep and mourn for Sarah, and then stood up from before his dead. The only thing I want to add to that, because I don't want to always be adding everything to everything, but remember what happened when David was grieving over his sick child, Bathsheba's child? He was grieving, he was mourning. And then when he was told the child died, he did something. Anybody remember what he did? He stood up. He ate. He washed his face. And he said, I'll see the child again. And I praise the Lord for those two examples of Abraham and David. David did his weeping. Now here's something to think about, because sometimes we have chronic illness, right? And there's always this debate. You have time to tell them goodbye. I didn't have time. Blah, blah, blah. Everybody's grief is their grief. All right? So it doesn't matter. Let's try to quit comparing and just work on fixing it. But when you have somebody in a chronic illness, you grieve the whole time. Then when they die, the perpetual grievers, they grieve after that, and they keep grieving. Some have grieved during the time of terminal illness, right? And then when it ends, they stand up, and they still grieve. You got to bury the person, and it's sad. But their grief span after, not all, but some, their grief span after that terminal illness is shorter, because they've been doing their grieving while the person was alive. I know that isn't always the case, but it often is the case. And people will be like, well, why are you not sad anymore? I've been dealing with the grief, the 7 stages of grief throughout the illness. For my wife, when her mom passed, she was very sad. But she'd also done the vast majority of her grieving for the 2 years prior. And so for her span of grieving was a little less. And so don't think because your grief is different than some. Abraham obviously knew Sarah was dying. It wasn't that she just got killed in a car accident. She passed at old age. And he grieved. David grieved while the child was sick. And the moment the child passed on to the next lot, to God, he said, okay, that's it, I'm done. I've done what I can. So don't judge each other and don't judge yourself. Who's next? Is that Miss LaDonna, I think, is next in 2 Peter 3:14. Remember, if I call your name, you can just shake your head and we'll go to the next person. 2 Peter 3:14.
Wherefore, beloved, seeing that ye look for such things, be diligent that you may be found of him in peace, without spot and blameless.
Right. I missed a question. Abraham took it upon himself to secure a place of burial for his wife. That's the other thing. We often don't include family in the preparations for death, and that's a part of grieving. Part of grieving, and I did not allow my family to get very much involved in November. And I look back on that, and I would change that if I could. I would have had more involvement, but I was protecting them. Right? I was not great. I was protecting them. I was doing the things, and that put a lot of burden on me, and it also gave them a difficulty in closure probably at times. So I would encourage you, once a person is dead, get involved in their burial. Get involved in their processes and don't run away from it. Miss LaDonna, what's the answer? Our peace and blamelessness before God depends on our being diligent about our responsibilities. Yes. You can't see, here's the thing, when we have perpetual mourning, what happens? We quit living, right? When we have perpetual mourning, we quit living. Our responsibilities begin to fall by the wayside. The bills begin to go unpaid. The relationships begin to sever because we're pulling ourselves away from everybody. Mourning is good. It's a part of the process. But we must at some point wake up and say, God, thank you. I'm done now. And walk on and move forward. And that is not specific. I mean, it's not like I can say 6 months, you better be done. It might take a year for some folks. I would say it shouldn't take much more than that. It's a long time. And but I'm not saying that if it does, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying when you start looking at, are you wallowing in it? Are you rolling through these thoughts? Because I know what my head was doing. My head was racing thoughts about it. And unfortunately, not always the case, but I had the medical examiner describe to me in detail what occurred. And so I had some other things that were going on in my mind and things like that. And so I wouldn't let it go. When I talked to Brother Carter, that's what he said. You're not letting it go. You are focusing on these things. Even focusing on not being sad is still not focusing on God. And so I hope you understand I'm not being difficult. I'm just trying to set some things truthfully to you. Okay, who's next? Steve, you going to go next? Oh, Chris. Yeah, Chris sits in front of Steve. Okay, but he's standing at the back. You know when you fall asleep in class. Yeah. All right.
Notice in this wonderful example, Abraham had a time of mourning and weeping, and then it says he stood up from before his dead. There was a time appointed for him to respond emotionally to his loss, and then that time was to be done with. Abraham did not allow himself to continue in sorrow, but instead he stood up from mourning.
Yep. He made a decision. He chose to change just like our thoughts and beliefs lead to action change. He chose to say, okay, I'm done. I've done my process and I'm good. I don't think, and we don't have it recorded, but I do want to say, being a human, that I don't think Abraham never got sad again. I'm sure there are times. But you also see that Abraham never went back to that place again where he buried Sarah. And so there's some import to that as well. I'm not saying don't go to the graveyard. I haven't. I probably won't for a long time. But, because I can't. But that doesn't mean some can't. So you have to know who you are and stand before the Lord and give yourself permission to mourn, but then give yourself an admonition to stop. Steve, next paragraph.
This is one of the hardest but most necessary things for a bereaved
Yeah, it's okay.
person to do in responding to their loss biblically. Many around you will tell you that grief is personal and that you should take as long as you like to weep and mourn over your deceased. But nothing could be farther from the true needs of every mourner and the example God has given us in the Bible.
Yep. The longer you grieve and mourn, the more you're going to let things go that need to be done. And I found myself in that position. My performance at work wasn't doing well, and my boss would be like, "We understand, I get it," but I knew that I wasn't holding up my end of the bargain at work, and so I was getting things done. It just wasn't in a good, timely manner, and there were just days where I'd just sit there and stare at my screen, and I couldn't. You got to stop mourning at some point. You have to. And so, anyway, I'm sharing things with you. I just want you to understand that I understand. I get it. Next, is that Miss Rose?
Yes. It takes every ounce of faith and trust in God that you can muster to throw yourself upon Him for strength and to cease mourning. But it must take place. Notice what Abraham did after he stood up for mourning. He went to secure a place of burial for his dead loved one. He didn't allow well-meaning friends or family to take these responsibilities from him so he could stay with the death and mourn.
Yeah. Think about Philippians chapter 4 when you're in mourning. And it says in verse 13, "I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me." But understand that that whole chapter has to do with this as well. Your thoughts, contentedness. You know what? When you're grieving uncontrollably, inconsolably, you are not content. I know for me, it's not fair. I'm mad, and other thoughts, right? And so you got to think about that idea of what thoughts are in my head. Whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue, any praise, think on these things. And so even in that, there is a time to say, "Lord, I don't have the strength, but I'm going to come to you. I know it's time for me to stop. Help me. Show me the way." And so it's funny, and I'll let Miss Anderson go next. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. This is a big lesson. This is a hard lesson because I sound like an ogre teach. You know, I'm not teaching it, we're reading it, but it sounds to society, I guarantee you, it can sound ogreish, right? Like you're being a jerk. Give them time. And I promise you, it can sound that way. Thank goodness y'all are Christians, and for the most part, you understand. But there were times where I was, in the last few weeks to a month, I'm preaching a message to you, and a verse comes up, and God hits me and says, "You got to stop. I'm in control." And I tell you, it's like a breakthrough, and I'm here preaching to y'all, and y'all may be sleeping, but God's breaking through to me, and so I'm kidding. Next paragraph, Miss Anderson. Sorry to talk so much. Bella.
Against all the desires of his flesh and the emotional sadness he felt, he stood up and with diligence attended to the business of securing the final arrangements for his wife. He made himself to be busy with making the last provision he would ever make for Sarah. This act of diligence allowed him to have closure and by his own deeds write the last chapter in the book of his experience with her death.
Yep. So that's good. I'll try not to say anything. Jesse, if you get that. Oh, Shelby. Sorry. Look at that last paragraph.
Perhaps you have never stood up from mourning. Maybe you have failed to put an end to your grief by being diligent to bring closure to the final chapter of your relationship with your deceased loved one. No one else can take this responsibility on for you. You alone must turn the final page, close the book, stand up, and walk away.
Before we go on to the exercising truth, I'm going to ask for feedback. Abraham was in mourning approximately 3 to 7 days. That would have been kind of the traditional mourning period for them. And so after about 3 to 7, do you understand? 3 to 7 days, not weeks, months, years. Our example of David, our example of Abraham was short mourning and then moving on with life. And I don't mean that in a callous way to our loved ones. I just mean that we're still here and we have to move forward and serve God and express our life with Christ to others. So what I have written here is this was a volitional moment to move on. It was a volitional. See, even my internal wants to call it bad. It was a volitional moment to move on, where Abraham looked at his life and looked at his past wife and said, it's time. And he made a choice. And he said, and I don't know, we don't have it illustrated exactly, his conversation with God. He did not have the wealth of scriptures we have in order to strengthen us even more. He just decided, I can't change this. What's the final step of grief? Anybody remember? It's acceptance. And he said, I can't change this. So I'm gonna live my life. And I'm gonna go on. And it was volitional. That's the biggest thing we as Christians got to remember in addiction, in anything, is it is volitional. It is a choice you make. The addicted choose to continue to allow themselves to stay in their addiction. They say, no, you have never been addicted. You don't know that, number one. And number two, I don't have to have been addicted to know the truth of God. And the truth of God is our flesh does not have to be in control. We can allow God to be, even in this area of grief. I know I'm not the normal yelling crazy person that I am. These lessons are harder than some lessons, so bear with me on that. Exercise. Feedback, questions. What have you learned? Anything touch you this week? We generally have some good feedback. So I rely on y'all to help me with this. Anything? Give Brother Pikett a mic, please. Is that okay, Brother Pikett? We're kind of doing this so that I can give this playlist to somebody that I can't sit down with and give it to them. So any good things.
Well, I just want to support you.
Okay.
Losing a child is not like you losing other. Okay, it's different.
Yeah.
In between losing both of my children, I lost my mom and dad. It was way different
Yeah.
than losing a child. So we're in I don't know what it is. Maybe that's something you should look up. Are we in the 1%, 2%, 5% of people that have to bury their children? So we're in a very small arena.
Yeah, we're in a small club.
Yeah, a very small fraternity. And I don't think anybody can understand what it's like to lose a child if they have not lost a child.
And
That's for the people who haven't lost a child. Be careful what you say to people who have lost a child.
I appreciate that.
Because we have been very offended
Yeah.
by some knuckleheads.
I think.
And those weren't my grandsons because they're knuckleheads. And the other thing to support what you said
Apple in the tree.
is even though we're a very small fraternity, the individual incidences in there can be extremely different, like ours. One died from a bullet. That was instantaneous.
Yeah.
The other one was more painful because of its length of time. The other was sharper pain, I guess, because of
You can speak.
So I'm just saying we're just visitors here, but we've had experience in this, and I just wanted to support you in some of the things you said.
I appreciate
I totally
that.
agree with you.
I appreciate that, and it does feel that way. You know, when you run into somebody who's lost a child, it feels different. But I also want to say that no matter the fraternity you're in, God is still God. And these truths are still truths. And to your point, you've had the loss of parents, the loss of two different children in two very different ways. And they're different. They're all different. And so you can speak to that understanding that we should never judge how somebody is manifesting their grief We do want to teach truth and speak truth into their lives, but be patient and be careful. If you haven't been given permission, you cannot change, you cannot help them. That's why we're opening the grief class up, so that somebody can volunteer to come in and give us permission to teach them how to get through their grief. And so I appreciate Brother Pike. I know you're not a member, but you're my family, so, or I feel like you are anyway. So I appreciate that. Anybody else have something they want to add in to that? I'm not going to force you, but I sure appreciate whenever you speak. So, Jesse, we got Jesse.
I said these classes have helped me quite a bit because, my wife passed away, but it also reminded me of something that my dad told me when I was younger. Because when my grandparents passed away and my aunt passed away, his sister and all that, I wondered how he could keep on going, and he said, God's in control, but he said, he wants, life is for the living, and you got to keep going.
Yeah, you do. Life is for the living. That's a hard thing to also understand, because it feels callous. And when somebody's grieving, that is not necessarily the right thing to say. Right. Now, you have a special relationship with your dad, and that's different, right? A dad can come to a child and say, look, life's for the living. We need to keep moving. I love you, son. I love you, daughter. But that's a rare relationship. Mostly that is true. And in this setting is perfectly acceptable because we're teaching that. But I would caution you what you say to the grieving. I think the best thing you can say to the grieving is nothing. Sit there.
I think he was trying to tell me I've got to keep going.
I'm telling you, you're right. And what he told you as a father to a son, I would tell my sons that. I think it's appropriate. But I don't think it's appropriate like if, I came to my boss at work and maybe he lost a wife and I'm just a coworker and say, hey, life's for the living. Let's keep going. I think you're perfectly good. I would tell my son that, and I appreciate the input. Definitely. That is the truth. I come to give life and life abundant. He said he buried her out of his sight. Comfort one another with these words, right? Don't focus on the dead. Focus on comforting each other. All right. I would like to add a class at the end of all this on what not to say, and when not to say it. I will tell you this, the greatest from my experience, and I hope this is my one time, from my experience, the best thing you can say, Brother Packett came into my office at work. He has free reign. He came into my office at work and he just sat there. And we just sat next to each other for a little while.
I may not have articulated it quite. There was more to it than just that.
Yeah.
But
Please understand, what you're saying is fine. It is fine. It is good. It just made me think that there are some. One person told my mom, I'll get you, Miss LaDonna, I'm sorry. One person told my mom, the Lord's chastisement. My mother almost went to jail. You should respect your elders. And this is an older lady. She was old when we first got in the church 20-something years ago. She was old, so I understand. But my mom, my mother is not as graceful as I am. And y'all know how graceful I am. So I would, Jesse, I want you to understand, don't feel bad. I agree with your statement. I think it is the right statement. It's just not always the right time. Yes.
His father made a huge statement, but he said it in only a fatherly way.
That's true too. Dads, we're not looking at each other.
Literally.
Yeah.
Which is word for word.
Sure.
And it sounds cursed, but it wasn't.
It's a perfectly, that's why I'm serious. It is a perfectly acceptable father to son, spouse to spouse. And I wish I had a dad that would come in and talk to me. And that's honestly, when Brother Packett's around, sometimes I feel that way. He'll say things to me and I'll feel like that I needed to hear that, but nobody else could tell it to me. Yeah. Right? There are few people, Brother Coomer, Brother Pikett, that we're not around each other a lot. He can say what he wants to me, and I'm going to listen. If my stepdad's brain worked, and I don't mean that coarse. He's old. He's had a lot of problems, and he can't think well. So I'll say that's enough. Miss LaDonna.
What I was going to say is it would be good for all of us at some point to study Job, not from the perspective of Job's loss, but the perspective of what the friends did and did not do. And then let that be a guide as this is how you love people through a circumstance of mourning. And this is definitely what you don't do, because Job actually calls them what terrible friends you are.
Yeah,
And
miserable
you don't want to be a
comforters.
terrible friend to a loved one or a friend.
You know, so Brother Ogden, Jeremy Ogden, preached a message. We were in Arkansas. I know what happened. Somebody came to him and said something to him, because they know us and they knew our children were wayward, our sons are wayward. And I guarantee you somebody went to him and said, you know, God, you know, at some point, God's going to take somebody home. So he got up on Sunday night and he reminded everybody from Job. And he called it the sermon. You can probably get it on YouTube and find it. Miserable comforters are y'all. He did a really good job of making sure. And he didn't mention us, but I know what it was. And so, because we were Sunday in Arkansas when the message dropped. And so I know somebody said something to him and he's like, I'll take care of that. So, but you're right. Job is a perfect illustration of how to handle and how not to handle that. And
People don't know what to say.
they don't.
Until they say dumb things.
That's one way to put it.
People are hurting.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
When other people are talking to the one who has lost, they're also hurting, and they're just in
They
a
are.
state of it's a different hurt, but
They're
that
trying
kinda
to
helps
find their answers. And unfortunately, we are the subject. The griever is the subject. And yes.
Can I say something on the lighter side?
Yeah, get the mic though, because we want to hear it even that.
On the lighter side, and you might like
Maybe
this.
I don't want it on the mic.
And when I say this, 99% of the people, well, no, yeah, 99% of the people don't understand. We have a terrible expression in English and Western civilization called "so far, so good."
Yeah. Waiting on the
Okay.
next shoe to drop?
Yeah, it's terrible.
It is.
So I say, "so far, so good." See, you get it, and no one gets it. Okay?
You might want to make sure people get
Because
it.
supposedly they were friends, but they really weren't.
Yeah, so far no good. So, yeah, it's people don't know their Bibles. That's the problem, right? Miss Magnan, I'm sure, is going to bring something amazing.
I do have a couple things. One's a statement, and then I have a question afterwards from the book.
Yeah.
You know, when it was talking about here, the second paragraph, or where it was grieving and all this stuff, you know, my sister was here last week, and she was going to say something. She didn't, so I asked her. Her husband died 8 years ago, just out of the total blue, and it devastated her. And sometimes I think maybe she had her life wrapped up so much, like what it says in the identity. When I was reading the book, I saw some stuff. But the thing about it was, my sister almost committed suicide. She was so grieved by it, she almost did.
She's not alone.
And yeah, and that occurs. I mean,
Yeah.
I got a son that almost did the same thing, you know, so
Yeah.
we do get looking inward when we lose something like that very sudden like that.
Yeah.
It takes us, and if we don't look the right way, then that's where
100%.
we go, and that's what it was saying. Now, the next question I have, I was reading the book, and
Hold on, I'm sorry. Can you turn her up for me a little bit? I can't hear her. I'm struggling to hear a lot lately.
my big mouth,
Yeah.
that's a first.
Yeah, I'm sure, on purpose.
That's
Go
the
ahead.
first, not hear me. Now, the question I have, in the book, it talks of something, and now I can't remember exactly, but talking about almost like we shouldn't have Memorial Day as a holiday, remembering the dead. I mean, to me, that's a time to teach Bella and my students about what the men did a long time
Sure.
ago. No, we don't need to mourn and grieve what their death, but we need to remember, just like when our loved ones. I think about my mom and all the fun we had. My sister and I will be going down the road, we'll talk about the time that with Dad and Mom and everybody else and the fun we had. We remember things. We're not grieving, we're remembering.
Mhm.
And to me, that Memorial Day is remembering what these men and women did to give me the right to sit right here.
Yeah. I hear you on that, and I agree with that. I want to explain what he's saying.
Maybe I missed
And it's either not well represented. I can't remember when I read it whether he represented it well, and I had to and you just missed it, or I may have had to kind of fill in some gaps myself reading it. Here's because I talked to Brother Carter about it, and we went through Brother Carter's grieving class online, and so Brother Carter speaks as well to these questions. That one is difficult because it's individualistic, right? You laugh about because your grieving process is over. Once the grieving process has ended, and you've come to the place where you can speak about the dead, you can see pictures of the dead, you can laugh about the stories, that's okay. What he's talking about, the whole premise of the book, out of my sight, right? Abraham buried Sarah out of his sight. And it is a good illustration of the idea of not being able to grieve while the subject is always here in front of you. So for me, we had to remove the pictures from the home. We had to quit telling the stories. I've a couple of times said, y'all gotta stop. I can't right now. They're better about that. They don't necessarily have to have the pictures removed, the things like that. I can't go out to the grave right now. I can't have the pictures right now. I can't talk about the stories. I think I'm almost there probably. We're moving that way. I can't. I have to put him out of my sight. While I go through the process of getting my own head and my own heart where it needs to be before the Lord. Because all the stages of grief are inappropriate until acceptance. Bargaining, denial, whatever the rest of them, I'm sorry. Those stages of grief are wrong responses until you get to acceptance, which is the right response. So once, like your mom, you've gotten to the stage of acceptance. You can now joke, laugh, see a flower, go to the graveside. You can do all those things. Some can do that from the beginning, and it doesn't lengthen their grief. They're able to move forward. It's cathartic to them to talk about that. Others, it's not. His whole premise of the book, so writing from the premise, is that many aren't. And many need to take a pause. They make memorials. Not Memorial Day. I understand. Memorial Day, I totally agree with, and he does too, I'm sure, in its understanding of that. But to make up a memorial in your home for the person, to have all of these things when you're not done grieving is problematic for some, for many, honestly. Go follow up, yes.
I just have a question. That just made me think of something. This holiday they do something of the dead.
The Day of the Dead in Mexico?
Day of the Dead. How
Yeah.
is that right or wrong? Or I don't. Is it
There's a lot of reasons that's wrong. And it's ancestral worship. It's witchcraft. It had nothing to do with the grieving process at all that's bad about it. It's a pagan worship. Yes, sir. Catholicism, that's another whole subject, right? Because Catholicism never converts a people, it assimilates a people. So it brings in portions of their religion and marries them to the Catholic religion so that they can, and so you'll see a lot of mysticism in Catholicism, especially outside of Western civilization. But to your point, the Day of the Dead, when is it? It's like in September, isn't it? November. Yeah, it's coincidental to Halloween. And so the Day of the Dead is a total pagan worship, not just of the dead, but it also expands out into paganism and witchcraft. It's much like the Eastern religions where they put up shrines to their dead. And so it does that. I don't think has any bearing on what we're talking about here. That's just a whole different thing. But putting up shrines in your home to a person, like the flags, we put them up. I just had to, for me, I had to put it all out of my sight. And thankfully my family supportive of that and helps me with that. And so, yes, Shelby, whatever, Red?
One thing that has helped me in the last few months is something Mom and I had talked about. We had read in a book about, because Miss Linda was talking about identity wrapping up.
Yeah.
And so
I wanted to say something.
One of my fears, I've always feared losing those closest to me, and that, November really pushed that even more. And so it made me want to hold everybody else so tight. And what if I lose the next person? And so one thing that has helped me in talking with Mom too is, was it Miss Kuhn that said holding people in the palm of your hand instead of clutching them and letting it's in God's hands, already giving them to God before that time. And maybe I didn't have that with Saber,
Yeah.
but for moving forward, everybody's is in God's control, in God's hands, instead of me wrapping myself up with what if I lose this next person.
Yeah, that's Isabel Kuhn, a missionary to Chinese, indigenous. But so yeah, that points towards also everybody dies. Number 3, right? You're not always going to have somebody in your relationship. So here's part of this. When we got married, we didn't have anybody. Our family was us. And we held on to each other very tightly for a long time. We were known as the family that was always together. You see one, you see all 5. For years and years and years, that was us. We were codependent to some degree because we didn't have family. And we wanted to make a family that made it. And so when the boys left, of course, that was difficult. Identity. When Saber died, my big thing, and I still say this, if I ever write a memoir about it, just to kind of maybe help somebody else, that'll be kind of the opening line, is Hope died. The day Hope died. Because my hope was tied in him in reconciliation. My hope was tied in a homecoming. I, for a year or more, left the porch light on for no other reason than that would be on when he came home, when he was prodigal. So when he died, when that ME said, "Is this your son?" that instant, my identity, where I had placed my hopes in the wrong thing, died. It was gone. And it broke me big time. And so, our identity was wrapped in the wrong thing. Mother, father, sister, brother, wife, husband. All of us are going to suffer separation from somebody we love. And if our identity is in them, we will never recover unless God intervenes to fix our identity. Like you're at this church that preaches about identity and preaches about proper things. We don't preach soul winning as much, but we tell you how to handle every issue of your life day by day, right? And so, what? We do preach soul winning too. Tell people about Jesus, okay? I was thinking about that in my devotions this morning. The fact that how often we tell people about what God has done for us instead of telling people about God. And that's that. So anyway, good. I love this part more than the lesson. Miss Magnan, please don't worry about it because you're probably saying somebody else something has thought.
Well, no, just what you were talking about. In the book, it talks about even if, say, you have an out with someone and they die, you go to that to reconcile for yourself. Would that not help to go? And it said go to the wherever and to talk to, so to speak, talk to the person and apologize for whatever was between you to help yourself. And how does that? I don't know.
Well, we have done that before.
Yeah, you're talking about after passing.
After he passes, but you still have, like you have you were hoping to reconcile.
I have to come, and here's the part of that, is that even though, remember we talk about forgiveness and the fact that you have to forgive a person for yourself. But you also have to forgive yourself for things. Sometimes it is beneficial to have a moment, maybe by yourself, walk out in the woods, sit on your front porch. If you are able to go to the grave, I was not and probably still am not, go to the grave and say, look, for your own self, for your own peace, right? We're clear now, and forgive yourself. You have to. God forgives you, doesn't He? Yeah. And so that is not separate from the fact that sometimes some people have to put the dead out of their sight in order to recover. I don't.
We didn't have that because we had done our part.
We had already reconciled with him in our side, right? We had, before he left, and numerous times after, I sent him a text and said, hey, I want you to know that I know my part in this. I know as a father how I was. I know I missed some things, and I want you. But if you don't have that opportunity, it is okay to go to God and say, God, I can't get forgiveness from them. So, and I would probably differ with, you understand this material is not mine. I might differ in some areas with, and I would probably differ a little bit. I don't know that I'd go lay on the, he didn't say that, but I don't know that I would address the person who is dead and ask for forgiveness and stuff, because they've already gone through, they're up in heaven perfect. Nothing wrong if they're saved, right? I would go to God and say, God, I can't get right with them. But I do want to make sure that we're right, in that area. And God forgives you. And many of us have that. I know. I see some of your faces that you have that. And it's, if you haven't done that, I'd find a quiet place and I'd say, Lord, I need to get this together. Yes, ma'am. Blue.
When I did the C.A.L.M series
Green, I don't know.
at my previous church, there was a lady, a good friend of mine, very, very sweet, very tender-hearted, and she was struggling because her dad had passed away, and there was aught between them. And she didn't know how to express that. When we sat and talked for a while, I told her perhaps you could write one letter as
Yeah.
you were having a conversation with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of that letter, that one you burn because you're going to let it go. But then you sit down and you write another letter of all the wonderful memories, of the good character, what he instilled in you, the things that you bonded over, and that's the letter that you write with love, and you keep that one. And if you ever need to remember and go back to love and remembering who
Yeah.
he was.
I think it's acceptable. Be careful. Some people couldn't, of course. But yeah, I mean, writing a letter and saying, hey, there is some of that in the book and some other areas that we tell people to go. And like the forgiveness ledger, right? Yeah. Write down all the hurts that you have had. And if you have to, now if you don't need to, you're not burdened down by your hurts. Many people come into our counseling are at the end, right? And every hurt has piled up on them. And so we take them through that forgiveness ledger where they write down every hurt that God brings to their mind. And then on the other side of that is forgiveness, a date. And they'll say, Lord, I want to I forgive this. If you can't if you can't go to the person, you can at least go to God. And you can say, God, I forgive them before you. And we have the whole lesson about it. Don't need to preach a lesson tonight about it. But so be sure that could be a problem when somebody passes and there's a schism and you don't have a chance to reconcile that. Remember, forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. And they're both repentance and forgiveness are required for reconciliation. I had already asked my son for forgiveness and forgiven my son when he passed. I was hoping for the reconciliation part, for repentance and coming home. And I missed it. And that was my biggest, I think that was my biggest portion of my grief. The thing I couldn't come to terms to for so many months was the fact that didn't get to happen. And I was upset at God, mad at him for getting on a stupid motorcycle. And there was a lot of upsetness. But I would, if you have something that's unforgiven, I would write a letter or not. And be careful because the Tibetans burn everything and send it up to heaven. So, but I know what you mean, right? Destroy it. Get rid of it. And out of your sight. And if you do, write those good things down, especially if you got a memory like mine. Maybe have somebody else write them down and give it to you. And so...
That's why it's so important to deal with the living in a way of forgiving.
Yes. Out of all of this, you should learn that when you're dealing with the living, it is as if tomorrow won't come. Forgive, love, care for one another. One day I probably will write something, pamphlet or something, that deals with the idea of that, right? Because sometimes part of my grief is going back to lost moments, right? Even with Sam, who's still alive but is wayward. Sometimes my grief goes back to lost moments. So busy, so angry that I don't reach out, right? Instead of waiting on somebody else to reach out. Those things. Now I had reached out a lot to Saber, and eventually I quit because it wasn't diminishing returns when people are upset, right? And so sometimes you gotta pull back. But the mind still does it. Mine still says I shoulda one more time. And you got to realize no. But right now you've got people. Right now you've got folks that you can one more time. And you should. Anybody else? Very good. See, if you just open up. I love this part. I do. And so, okay, exercising Bible truth number 6. I got a little bit left. And I'll read these. How about that, since we've gone so far? And I'll read these out. And this is your exercise. That means it's your homework. We're not turning it in, but it is your homework. In order for you to put an end to your extended period of mourning, first identify any unfinished details or business of the life of the deceased that you may be responsible for tending to. Executor, all those kind of things, closing everything out, get it done. Don't play around, don't lag it on further. Pretending to actively pursue tying up loose ends. So get the loose ends tied up. Here it is, Miss LaDonna. Write a letter to yourself and God. This is similar to what you said. Write a letter to yourself and God declaring that you're standing up from before you're dead, putting into the mourning period, actively pursuing among the living again. Declare your dependence upon God and your need for His help to move forward toward the life He has for you and away from self-focus. There are studies today with this digital society we have. So I have a digital tablet that has a pen. It's e-ink, right? So I'm still writing on paper. But if you're bivocational like me, having a bunch of notebooks and books and things in your backpack will shorten your life. And so I'm losing inches every day. So this is my bridge, right? But newer studies have said that pen to paper, and e-ink is very similar. E-ink is very similar. Pen to paper, writing down your thoughts solidifies processes and helps to finalize thought processes in your head. So write a letter. Don't type it. Write it. And so then number 3, place the letter in your My Choice box. Remember the My Choice box from a previous lesson. Put the letter in a My Choice box and read it anytime you're tempted to fall back into mourning. Remind yourself of the commitment you made before God, to God and to yourself. Bible truth number 6, memory verse. Remember, these aren't memory verses for you guys. These are meditation verses. So I'm not asking you to, try to make sure you have it memorized by the end of the week. I just want you to put on a card. There's plenty at the back. Miss Maria brought. Yeah, I don't know why. Every time I say her name, Miss Maria, it's like, no, that's not her name. My brain says it. I don't know why. And so, Francis? Maria. We're going to call you Maria. And so, but anyway, yeah, now you're going to really mess me up. And so, but grab a card. All I want you to do is look at it many times throughout the day. You won't have to memorize it. It's just part of who you are at the end of the week. Wherefore, beloved, seeing that you look for such things, be diligent that you may be found of Him in peace, without spot and blameless. He doesn't want to find you mourning. He wants to find you in peace. Part of that is understanding and accepting the truth. God, this is what happened. And I don't understand it, and I don't have to. But you love me, and you have good thoughts for me. And God, I'm going to trust you. And I'm going to stand up and move forward. And I would even be careful of saying they would want me to move forward and all that stuff. Take them out of it. They're not the focus. God is. And you need to get that relationship before God and say, Lord, I love you. And Lord, I'm going to stand. All right? That's it.